Good day, everyone. Can someone please indicate before we begin if you're hearing? Thanks for confirmation. So as you know, this is our third online session, and the purpose of class today is to provide continued support for CW2. Last week, we had the opportunity to review a sample report from a student last year, and we were able to identify in that report what was good, what was not so good, and how we can improve our practice for CW2 2020. Previously, we reviewed all 10 units when we were prepping for CW1. I'm not sure if you remember in class. It's early in the semester. I had a discussion of all 10 units, and I'm referring to the learning materials from the UH. And we discussed them in preparation for CW1. Today, I would like to review all 10 units again, but for a different reason entirely. Earlier, I went through the 10 units to identify areas where MNCs were mentioned and discussed to ensure that we have overlooked none of the theories, none of the concepts relating to MNCs. So I was able to identify several areas where discussion on MNCs were conducted throughout the 10 units. So right now you should be able to, your view should be a PDF document of the 10 units, and I want to go through that to identify concepts and theories related to MNCs. Can you just please confirm that you are seeing this PDF document? The heading is Issues in the Global Economy. Just indicate, please. Thank you, great. Okay. So the purpose of this session, again, is we are continuing the provision of support for CW2, and we want to go through with a fine-tooth comb the 10 units and identify where MNCs were mentioned and how they were intertwined in a discussion of the 10 units of learning materials provided by the UH. So I have done that previously. I've highlighted the areas, and you should see that appearing on your screen. Okay, so we will begin with unit number 1, global interdependence. And unit number 1 is comprised of 3 sessions. The first session is understanding globalization. I will not discuss that because at this time, everybody should have a perfect understanding of what globalization is. We know that globalization involves something called market convergence. Let me just enable my pointer. Good. So globalization of markets, we understand what that is. Convergence and homogenization, and more importantly, MNCs play a role in the globalization of markets. And how do MNCs play a role in the globalization of markets? We see that globalization of markets involves convergence and homogenization, and multinationals often standardize their products, which helps to ease the growth of global markets. You see this word ease? It really means to accommodate or to facilitate. I think that's a better word, to facilitate the globalization process. So let me explain. Globalization involves convergence and homogenization, and multinationals, through the offering of standardized products, supports and facilitates the process of convergence and homogenization. Let us put this into perspective. Your assignment, an early part of the assignment, is to discuss the role of MNCs in the globalization process. And this is the first rule. We clearly see that MNCs support the globalization process, by fact of offering standardized goods. Standardized goods support homogenization, supports convergence, and so on. We have several examples of companies that have standardized goods, and the mere fact that they offer standardized goods facilitates and accelerates this phenomenon of integration. Globalization is about integration of markets, and offering standardized goods supports worldwide integration. If we continue with our discussion again, another facet of globalization, as you know, is globalization of production. And this refers to the dispersion of the production process worldwide. So here we see the role of MNCs. Globalization of production allows firms to locate production in a particular country or region, while sourcing input and services from a set of locations it selects around the world. So students, a second way in which MNCs facilitate or support the globalization process is through worldwide dispersion of its production and its productive activities. So far we have seen two ways in what roles of MNCs in the globalization process. The first is that they offer standardized products, which supports market integration and homogenization. The second is that they spread their production around the world, which further integrates the world into one unified marketplace. So that's the second role of MNCs in the globalization process. Let's move on now to session number 2, drivers of globalization. I didn't find anything in this session. Session number 3, however, session number 3 is right. Session number 3 is evidence of globalization. So we're still in unit number 1. Unit number 1, session number 2 pertains to drivers of globalization. I did not find any material related to MNCs in this session, but in session number 3, the evidence of globalization. So how can we see globalization? What is the evidence? What is the evidence of globalization? The evidence is that world trade is something physical, and imports from other countries, exports to other countries are the most tangible form of evidence to indicate the globalization of countries. Between 1970 and 2005, the world of volume trade grew by 27 times, while production only grew by 7.5 times. This reflects a huge volume of inputs being imported and re-exported in the form of finished goods. How can you use this in your assignment? The first part of your assignment is to discuss the role of MNCs. Students, you see worldwide trade. It would be useful if you could conduct research to find the value of global trade that is produced by MNCs. So that would be a third reason in which you could show the role of MNCs in the globalization process. Firstly, if you recall the discussion earlier, MNCs offer standardized goods. Secondly, they spread their production. And thirdly, they are responsible for a substantial amount of world trade, which is the greatest form of evidence of globalization. MNCs also play another role through developments of FDI. The total flow of FDI increased between 1992 and 2005. This is old data, by a staggering 140%. If you could find newer data, even with this old data, what we see is something very interesting, because FDI generally flows from MNCs. So a fourth reason or a fourth argument that we could postulate of how MNCs contribute to the globalization process is through financial integration. MNCs are responsible for a significant amount of FDI, and you should try to conduct research to support the amount of capital flows that have taken place globally try not to use this old period, maybe a newer period. So far, class, we have 4 roles of MNCs in the globalization process. 1, they have standardized goods, which supports integration and homogenization. 2, they spread activities worldwide. 3, they contribute significantly to global trade, which is the most significant evidence of globalization. 4, they contribute to financial integration by having a substantial amount of FDI. Again, if you could have data for the period of time and the amount. Let's continue with our discussion here. We are in unit number 2, the measurement of globalization. Unit number 2 has 3 sessions. I went through the sessions previously and highlighted the areas pertaining to MNCs. Session number 2, session number 3. So at session number 3, there was something that we could tie to MNCs, and this is economic globalization. I'm not sure if you recall, unit number 2 pertains to the measurement of globalization. We have 4 categories: political, social, technological, and economic globalization. So economic globalization can be measured by the amount of exports of goods and services as a percentage of GDP. We could continue by showing the share of exports in GDP. The total share of exports in GDP is a measure of trade integration. It measures the degree of dependency of domestic producers on foreign markets. The higher the ratio, the more globalized the country is. So my point is, we can say that MNCs, as you are aware, MNCs operate overseas. And if you consider Trinidad and Tobago, BP, BGM, all of those, they manufacture on Trinidad soil. When they export, that contributes to the GDP and the balance of payments. It improves the balance of payments of Trinidad and Tobago. So what we can say is that MNCs are also responsible for economic globalization. So students, the first part of your assignment is discuss how the role that MNCs play in the globalization process. Let's summarize what we have discussed. MNCs offer standardized goods, 1. Number 2, disperse production. Number 3, financial integration. Number 4, the earlier point was, can't remember the earlier point, number 4. And this fifth point here is that MNCs contribute to economic globalization, as I explained. They manufacture overseas, and when exports are sold, it contributes to the GDP and increases the balance of payments in a favorable manner for the foreign country. This point, financial markets, ties or connects with the point I was previously discussing. MNCs provide a substantial amount of FDI. And there's some material here. MNCs are the primary and dominant players in cross-border transactions. MNCs, this is important, MNCs can be used to indicate the level of integration and interconnectedness of our country. So students, this is exactly the kind of literature you would want to include in your assignment. By 2010, there were 90,000 current companies which were controlling 810,000 foreign affiliates. MNCs also account for 60% of the world's exports in goods and services. And that is an instructive point, meaning that earlier on we were saying globalization of trade, students. Let me just scroll back up. Earlier on, we were saying that the most significant piece of evidence of globalization is worldwide trade. And now we have the evidence of that. The evidence of that is this statement here, is this statement that MNCs account for more than half of the world's exports in goods and services. So we see a clear and unadulterated role that MNCs play in the globalization process. especially pertaining to economic globalization as a measurement of interconnectedness. Let's move on to session unit number 3. So in case you have just joined, the purpose of this session today is to peruse all 10 units again and to identify where MNCs were discussed within these 10 units and how you might include some of this literature in your assignment. Unit number 3 pertains to technology and age of globalization, and I perused the literature and there is some material that we can use. Good. MNCs are responsible for contributing to globalization through technological collaborations. I would like to explain what this is. MNCs, as you know, often participate in business ventures such as acquisition, mergers, many cross-border business ventures such as alliances, such as joint ventures, contractual agreements, be it short-term or long-term. So the idea here is, remember, in your assignment, you have to discuss the role of MNCs in the globalization process. And we can argue that MNCs contribute to globalization through technological collaborations, be it acquisitions, mergers, joint ventures, licensing agreements, contract manufacturing, and all of this involves cross-border business ventures. So let's just summarize what we have discussed thus far. We have been arguing that MNCs have an important role to play in the globalization process. Let's summarize. 1, through standardized goods. 2, dispersion of production. 3, financial integration. 4, they provide evidence of economic globalization because they contribute more than 60% of global trade. And another reason we are just seeing here is that MNCs support the globalization process through technological collaborations and cross-border business ventures through acquisitions, mergers, alliances, joint ventures in other jurisdictions of the world. So I'm not saying you have to include all of this, but certainly some of it can be pieces of evidence that you could include in the first part of your assignment. Let's continue with our discussion. Unit number 4. Unit number 4 is global governance. So I perused the literature. There was a bit of information. Unit 5, global trade. There was a bit of information. Session 4 of global trade. So none on unit 4, none on unit 5. Unit 6, yes. So unit 6 discusses international trade, in services. And at session 2 of unit 6, there was a sentence that I found that was interesting. The national balance of payments are the most important source of data for international trade in services, not only services, but products. The balance of payments, as you know, is a statement, a financial statement that records a country's trade relations with the rest of the world. It records it in 3 categories: trade in products, trade in services, and capital flows. One aspect of your assignment is to discuss how MNCs have benefited your host country, be it developed or developing. And it would be interesting if you could find evidence how the balance of payments of your host country improved, be it the section that deals with physical goods, that is called the visible balance, or the section that deals with services, that is called the invisible balance, or the section of the balance of payments that deals with capital, and that is called the capital account. So any evidence that any of these three accounts, the visible, the invisible, or the capital account, if you could find evidence that any of these have increased because of the presence of your multinational, then that will be definitely a benefit that your multinational has had on the host country. Let's continue our discussion. Unit number 6, again, unit number 6, session 3, deals with trade and services. And here we find a role, the role of the WTO. The WTO is the World Trade Organization, and it's responsible for helping countries to lower their barriers to increase international trade. The WTO subsumed GATT, meaning that GATT was the precursor to the WTO. It was established in 1947, and by 1995 it was renamed the World Trade Organization. One aspect of GATT was GATS. GATT is General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs for Physical Goods, and GATS is General Agreement on Trade for Services. And GATS, which is now part of the WTO, permitted countries to implement measures to tackle fraud and to tackle environmental problems. Why this is important, students, is the last part of your assignment requires that you discuss recommendations for how the travesties of MNCs can be averted. And we spoke about regulation. Governments may pass their own laws. MNCs may try to self-regulate. We spoke about regulation from society in the form of pressure groups and so on. And also regulation may come from the World Trade Organization, since the World Trade Organization has clauses that tackle environmental problems and that hinder fraud. Those clauses are not discussed here, but definitely you would want to research how the World Trade Organization, what clauses they have to regulate environmental problems and to tackle fraud, be it tax evasion, tax avoidance, transfer pricing, etc. Unit number 7, financial globalization. So I perused this material beforehand to identify any possible area of MNCs that you could include in your assignment. Unit number 4. So as I perused sessions 1, 2, and 3, I didn't find anything, or maybe if there's anything I overlooked, you yourself could peruse the materials. At session number 4 is the world flat. This is an expression which refers to the fact that not all developing countries have benefited from capital flows and FDI. We have argued several times before that one of the benefits that MNCs provide to their host countries is FDI. And we want to see that this benefit is skewed, meaning that not all developing countries benefit equally from FDI. I saw some interesting material. It said, it is clear from the data, this data is kind of old, 2006. It would be interesting if you could find newer data. It is clear from the data that 25% of FDI was received by China. So right away, there's over 100 developing countries around the world, more than that, 150 developing countries, and one country has received a quota. And over 50% of financial flows accrue to just 5 countries. So this is interesting. We see that more than half of the FDI have gone to just 5 developing countries. That means that the remaining of the developing countries around the world get scraps. And so this is something that you could bring into your discussion in your assignment, that FDI, yes, it is indeed a benefit for developing countries, but we see that a handful of developing countries are the ones that really benefit from FDI, namely China, and a handful of others benefit from FDI in the amount of more than 50%. So not all developing countries benefit equally. And that is the point that I'm trying to make. Let's continue with our discussion. Unit number 8, a race to the bottom. I recommended last day, and I recommended before. In fact, it was Sheldon who had pointed out 2 sessions before that you want to include a discussion of various theories in your assignment. Race to the bottom is not a new theory. This has been discussed in class innumerable times. And race to the bottom often produces very adverse consequences: exploitation of people, exploitation of government, exploitation of the environment. And MNCs have an important part to play in this, because MNCs are the ones who are responsible for driving the race to the bottom phenomenon. Globalization and the environment, another theory that you would consider, I shouldn't say include, that you may want to consider, is the Kuznets curve theory. It is hypothesized that the income level of an economy has a relationship with the level of environmental degradation. This is an area that is very contentious. MNCs have been known to destroy the environment of many countries. And we see here the Kuznets curve can be observed for pollution because more affluent, meaning richer countries, and progressive countries with higher levels of education place greater value on cleaner environment and place more emphasis on establishing institutional and non-institutional measures for a clean environment. Why is this important, students? Your assignment involves or requires that you must have a comparative evaluation between the impacts of MNCs on their host developing and their host developed. Your literature, your research will reveal that there's always greater environmental destruction and issues in the developing than the developed countries. And one reason for this can be linked to the Kuznets curve, which is that developed countries often have a greater level of wealth, higher levels of education. And because of this, the citizens establish institutional reforms and non-institutional measures that protect and that safeguard their environments. So one reason that could account for the fact that the developing countries often are the ones that experience more environmental destruction, the developed countries, can be tied back to the Kuznets curve theory. Before I forget, there was a theory I was researching online. It is called the Harrod-Dumar model. It is spelled Harrod-DOMAR. And what I researched is that the Harrod-Dumar model suggests that there is a positive correlation between FDI and economic growth. So if you are making the claim that your MNC was responsible for a substantial amount of FDI, which led to economic growth, then you have a really good opportunity here to integrate a discussion of the Harrod-Dumar model, because this model shows, it's a theoretical model or framework that shows a positive correlation between FDI and economic growth in any country. So any country that has higher flows of FDI, the Harrod-Dumar model states very categorically that we could find a positive correlation between inflows of FDI and economic growth. So some of the theories we referred to so far, the race to the bottom theory, Kuznets curve theory, the Harrod-Duma model, and also other academic pieces of literature such as the balance of payments and so on. Let's continue with our discussion. The argument is that the North is an expression used to refer to developed countries, have strong environmental policies, while the South is an expression used to describe developing countries, have weak environmental policies, opening up the opportunity for multinationals to relocate production to pollution-intensive goods. And not only that, opening up the opportunity for MNCs to exploit South countries or developing countries, since they are the ones to have weak environmental policies. Again, this is useful when you are comparing. Remember, part of your assignment is, after you have discussed the impact on developing and the impact on developed, you are supposed to compare what your results revealed. If your results reveal that there was more destruction on developing countries, which I imagine that is what you would find, this can be another reason. Apart from Kuznets' curve, another reason is that literature suggests developed countries have stronger policies, while developing countries have weaker environmental policies. This was taken from session number 2 of unit number 8, globalization and the environment. Let's move on to session number 3. This word regulation. If you view the conference that we held, that was 2 sessions ago, at the end of the structure that I recommended for your assignment, recall you are required to make recommendations for how the activities of MNCs can be kept in check. And I used a word, and that word was regulation. There are different forms of regulation, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to regulation. And whether it's regulation from government, self-regulation like CSR, social regulation from lobby groups, advocacy groups, regulation from the BWIs, World Trade Organization, and so on. The idea is that regulation, you see the UH says, regulation is key in determining the impact that trade will have on the environment, and multinationals also fall into this category of regulation. The World Trade Organization has a role to play in regulation. Regulation of trade and the environment is contained in several multilateral environmental agreements. The WTO allows members to design and implement measures to address environmental concerns. The multilateral agreements, however, are the main enforcement regulations. Members sign up to these agreements and must comply with conditions. What I'm saying is this: even if the government of a poor developing country does not have an existing legislative framework to protect the environment, to use as weapons to keep MNCs in check, if that country does not have the legislation or legislative capability, they can still fall back on the World Trade Organization if they are a member of the World Trade Organization, because the World Trade Organization permits measures to protect the environment, and members that sign up to the World Trade Organization must comply. So a government could tell a multinational company that the rules of the World Trade Organization stipulate that there must be protections and provisions for the environment, etc. So students, what I'm suggesting is that the World Trade Organization also plays a role in regulating can play a role in regulating the impact of MNCs. Unit number 9, migration. Migration of people to other countries in search of employment. So again, we see the role of MNCs in a globalization process. They are not only responsible for economic globalization or financial globalization, technological globalization through technological collaborations. And I want you to observe the language that I'm using, and I'm doing so deliberately. I use expressions like economic globalization, financial globalization, technological globalization through collaboration such as joint ventures, strategic alliances, mergers and acquisitions. And apart from all of that, which I underscored, MNCs have a role to play in migration because they may recruit and select employees from one region of the world and assign them projects in another region of the world. And this is because people are always in search of employment. So MNCs affect the migration pattern of the world. Another important point, MNCs influence the migration pattern of the world because people are always in search of employment. Our final unit, global poverty asymmetric effects. So students, what are we discussing today? This is the exact set of materials that were discussed previously, but we are looking at it today from a completely different perspective. We are looking at the same materials, yes, but we want to understand where MNCs have been brought into the discussion in these 10 units. Session number 3 of unit number 10 discusses the impact of globalization on developing countries. Let's see if we could identify the role that MNCs play with respect to global poverty in developing countries. Employment. Some pieces of literature use the expression TNCs, which means transnational corporations. There are slight differences, but generally can be used interchangeably with MNCs. So MNCs take advantage of cheap labor. They create unskilled jobs. So one benefit that MNCs provide for their host countries is job creations, particularly in the unskilled category. Evidence shows that where TNCs have relocated, the absence of planning and the creation of new factories have promoted undesirable effects, such as urban migration. This puts increased pressure on local government to provide social services, such as education and housing, and other social amenities, such as sewage. This places undue pressure on already strained government budgets. My point is this: you are required to discuss the undesirable, not just favorable consequences that MNCs have on their host countries. And one undesirable consequence, which we did not discuss before, is congestion, bottlenecks, undesirable internal migration. This is what happens when an MNC establishes their operations in a particular region of a country. What it causes is it changes the internal migration pattern. People from rural areas migrate to the area where the MNC has been established, and it urbanizes that area. But what it does, it creates problems for housing. There's congestion, there is bottlenecks beginning to arise. Governments are now forced to create low-income housing. They are now forced to create systems for local roadways, drainways, and sewage, which places a strain on already low budgets of poor and developing countries. So my point here is that MNCs, yes, they jobs, albeit unskilled, right? On one hand, that's a positive, but on the other hand, The same job creation could lead to undesirable internal migration, creating problems like overcrowding, bottlenecks, congestion, adding pressure to government to create housing, roadways, running water, drainage, etc. So the idea here is one problem that MNCs create is congestion, bottlenecks, undesirable internal migration. Let's continue with our discussion. The desperation of developing countries for FDI has often put TNCs in a position of power that compromises labor standards. Sometimes this happens because local governments do not have adequate legislation governing labor relations. So students, you would have heard me describe previously, and in the structure that I sent out, this is the revised structure that I sent out by email from Jude sometime before. There was a statement that I made that MNCs are more powerful than entire governments. This is where I got that information. MNCs are placed in a position of power because of the desperation that developing countries have for FDI. And apart from that desperation, MNCs in a financial measure are more powerful than governments. The assets of MNCs sometimes exceed that of governments, placing them in positions of power. Let's examine the impact of MNCs on developed countries. So I saw some interesting literature here. Trade has contributed to the often changing pattern of employment in developed countries. With lower barriers to trade, developed countries face increased competition from cheaper imported manufactured goods in developing countries. These goods produce labor-intensive methods in developing countries because they are very cheap. And this has led to deindustrialization. You see, this is a negative consequence of MNCs on developed countries. And before I explain, I would like anyone, can you say in the chat what you understand by deindustrialization and how MNCs cause this, and why is this undesirable? Why could this be perceived as undesirable for developed countries? This was a point we did not discuss before in the previous sessions, and we are seeing here in the literature that MNCs contribute. It's indeed controversial because on the one hand, yes, they create jobs for developing countries. On the other hand, it causes a loss of jobs for the developed countries. Not only is it a loss of jobs, it causes deindustrialization. Can anyone explain what we mean by deindustrialization? Or give an example of deindustrialization that has happened in a developed country. This is indeed an undesirable consequence for MNCs in developed countries. Anyone wants to explain what you understand, interpret by deindustrialization? It would be nice if you have an example of deindustrialization in a developed country. Anyone in your chat, do you have any examples of this, evidence of this? Yes, Bridget, that's exactly the example I was thinking about, the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt, and you are spot on, and I would like to develop that point further. So the entire of, I would say, about 5 or 6 states in the US, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Alabama, I think, they lost jobs to China because of cheaper labor in China. So an entire sector, the steel sector in the US, was brought to its knees, and MNCs, multinational corporations, offshored all of their production to China, where it could have been conducted at a lower rate. This resulted in the closure of large amounts of industries in those 5 states, contributing to deindustrialization of that sector in the US. Now, the US focuses more on non-industrial aspects of production, including things like services, the financial thing, and so on. And MNCs contribute to this. So on one hand, yes, the US economy is driven by the services sector, the financial services sector, and so, but the previous sectors that built their wealth on industrialization have now been deindustrialized. So deindustrialization refers to the dismantling of industries, and that has a lot to account from MNCs. I see some people have been making more comments in the chat. Good. Students, that is the end of the PDF document. So we have discussed the 10 units. This is not new. This is the second time the 10 units have been ventilated for discussion, but this time I specifically focused on the on MNCs, how you can integrate a discussion of MNCs into your assignments. Ordinarily in our physical classes, what I would do is I would provide face-to-face discussion. I would go and meet with all of you individually so that you could tell me, give me feedback on the countries that you have chosen, the MNCs, what were the positives, the negatives, and how your research has been coming along. And granted, we cannot meet face-to-face, but I would still like to continue that interaction and process. So could you tell me in your chat, give me an idea of the MNC you have chosen, the countries for discussion, the positives and the negatives. In the last week, I have received about 20 assignments for review. Those of you who have not received a review from me, you will hear from me tonight. I could probably do about 4 reviews tonight, and maybe tomorrow about maybe 8 or 10 reviews again. So what I would like to do is extend the deadline to encourage as many students as possible to submit. So originally my initial deadline was 8 a.m. on Friday. Today is now Saturday, and I'm going to extend the deadline so that more students can submit their assignments for review. I will extend it to tomorrow 8 a.m. So I see some people are saying thanks. So you have 2 additional days, while the original deadline was the 3rd, which was yesterday at 8 a.m. I will extend it until the 5th, which is tomorrow at 8 a.m. Those of you who have not submitted, you have additional time to submit your material. Please be mindful that I am reviewing chronologically. So if you submit today and if you submit tomorrow morning by 8 o'clock, you can't expect to hear from me until midweek, because there are other people who have submitted before. And those who have submitted before, you can expect a response by tonight or by tomorrow. For the rest of you who have submitted, can you please tell me? I would like some feedback so I can guide you to ensure your discussion is on the right track. Anyone in this anyone in this chat, can you tell me in this conference? Can you tell me, give me an idea of the company you have chosen, and I would like to know what are some of the benefits and what are some of the disadvantages that company has had on your developing countries. So I'd like to do that now. One, can you tell me? Although you will receive a detailed review, we can also have that same face-to-face discussion here in a virtual environment, in a virtual sense? I know, Natalie, you had said previously Nestle was your company. Anybody else? So I see we have other people. Bridget, Kemba, Jillian, anyone? Can you indicate, Jillian, what is your company? What has your research findings revealed? I would just like to guide you to make sure that your discussion is on point. I'm not hearing from anyone. Could you please indicate if the discussion is still live? Could you indicate if you're hearing me in your chat, please? Anyone, could you indicate if you're hearing? Okay, good. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Who do you that you're hearing? So anyone, please feel free to tell me about what your research findings suggested. Who was your MNC? Julio, yes, your discussion was also on Nestle. Julio, what were the two countries you chose? Just type in there quickly. Nestle and India. India, that was your development, and Canada. Just type in quickly, what were the main benefits and drawbacks for India? Let's just focus on India. What was the main benefit to India? What was the drawback to India? What he's doing, so I also welcome comments from the other students just to guide your research. So Julio, you're saying the problems in India were environmentally related, I imagine, water pollution. And so I want to ask, do you have data to support this? When I say data, like numbers, how many rivers were polluted, how many gallons, etc. Were you able to quantify in monetary terms? What was the loss? What was the loss? And I really want to emphasize the quantification, use of periods and data. So Julio, I didn't receive an assignment from you. So you have up until tomorrow, if you like. Julio, tell me, do you have data, numbers, periods, actual monetary values for your environmental destruction in India? While I wait on Julio from Kemba, I would like to openly say thank you for your guidance. In CW1, you're welcome. You're welcome, Kemba. Just by the way, students perform very, very, very good. I received feedback from more than 12 students, and 10 of them had scores in the high 80s. I'm really, really happy. And the other students had scores in the 70s. So that's really a phenomenal performance. So I hope we continue that performance in CW2. So Julio, yes, you didn't say if you have data to support your points in India, data, numbers, and monetary values. Good, very good. Also, Julio, remember you want to make a comparison, and to facilitate that comparison, you need data. With your discussion in Canada, when comparing to India, I see Julio is saying here, wells reducing by 300 feet. Very good, and that's the kind of data that we like. What did your research findings suggest, Julio, that there was less environmental destruction in Canada? I imagine that is the case. But I want to ask you why. Why was there less destruction in Canada? This is the kind of debate you want to have in your assignment. Why? Because part of the assignment requires a comparison, so you should say why. While Julio, while you're responding, Kemba, I see you have chosen Nestle, what were your countries? Kemba, the countries that you chose for CW2. So Kemba, you chose South Africa. Julio, you're saying they were antagonized by the Canadian government. Good. So what are you saying, Julio? Do you have evidence that there was less destruction because the Canadian government had a strong foothold and had regulation, legislative? Very good, good. So Julio, that's exactly what we want. And not only Julio, everyone else in this conference, you see how he's providing evidence. He's making a comparison between India and Canada. And he is in the comparison, he is saying that there was less environmental adversity or repercussion on Canada because of government intervention. Good, good. For Kemsi, your countries were South Africa and the US. What were some of the benefits and drawbacks in South Africa? Kemba, while you're typing, anybody else, please feel free. I just want to make sure that you have a good quality discussion. Imagine this to be likened to when I would come around in class and have the face-to-face session. It's the same thing, just it's in a virtual sense. Some of you have indeed, yes, submitted your assignments, and the others who haven't, I've extended the deadline until tomorrow. So Kemba, some problems is you discuss employment, unethical behavior, child labor, backward technologies. Very good. Here data. Do you have a monetary value, like the employment value? How much millions in terms of employment and GDP, economic growth? Do you have good? I see yes. Also percentages, excellent. Is it new material, Kemba, like within the last decade? Very good. Your child labor point, do you have data? Do you have monetary values in terms of paying lower wages? How much GDP did it cheat the government of South Africa? How much money was lost because of paying low salaries in South Africa? Do you have a monetary figure that you could quantify? Yes. So good. The reason I'm asking is that you can facilitate the comparison by using numbers. So if you say in South Africa, Nestle contributed 10 or $100 million in job creation. However, in South Africa, Nestle denied the government $200 million because $200 in GDP by paying low wages and having child labor. Then we can conclude that the impact of Nestle in South Africa was a negative one because the loss of income and the loss in GDP outweighed the benefits in salaries and job creation, etc. So I really want to emphasize the importance of having numbers and trying to quantify the benefit than trying to quantify the disadvantage. Kemba, your developed country was US. I imagine that there was less environmental destruction, etc. in the US. Is this true? Please indicate. No, not really. I just mentioned, I gave data for employment, economics, benefit. Okay. Well, what would really, I know it might be difficult to find or to quantify the actual dollar value, but if you could find any semblance of evidence, that always helps. In the US, do you have evidence that there was less destruction? Others, please feel free to jump into the discussion. In the US, there was some environmental issues with drought and so on. But Kemba, from all your research, what would you say? There was more adversity in the US or in South Africa? Yes, very good. So as I imagine, there was less. What did your research reveal? Why did Nestle have less destructive consequences in the US than in South Africa? What evidence do you have of this? Yes, there was less industrialization. And my earlier question, Kemba, do you have any what is your reasoning for Nestle having less less destructive impact in the US than in South Africa? So I see you have points like industrialization and FDI, but my earlier question, why did Nestle, do you have evidence for that, Kemba? Or you haven't gotten evidence as yet? It's okay, you could just say. Basically, I'm asking if evidence, if you have evidence, yes, what is the evidence? So you see, I have evidence for a justification why there was less destruction in the US. What is the evidence? I'm asking just to keep you on the right track. That's the only reason. Okay, so while Kemba responds, I would like to open the floor to others. If you have any questions, and also I really wanted to extend the deadline and try and get feedback from others in the chat about who your MNCs are and what evidence you have for their benefits, what evidence you have for their negatives and comparisons. Anyone? So we have some feedback here from who you want some feedback from Kemba. So Sheldon, I find you're quite quiet today. Sheldon, I know you've submitted your report and we've spoken. What evidence did you find to justify that your MNC had less destructive consequences in your developed country? What evidence did you have? So while we wait on Sheldon to respond, yes, strict labor laws. Which was your developed country, Sheldon? The USA. Good. Also, were you able to find a monetary value to quantify the benefits and disadvantages? I mean, yes, it is very easy to say the benefit was FDI or the benefit was job creation. And yes, it is very easy to say that, yes, the disadvantage was environmental destruction. But in terms of a dollar value, were you able to assign a dollar value for the benefits and the disadvantages? The reason is that if you could assign a dollar value, you will be in a strong position to compare. So, Sheldon, do you have were you able to quantify to that extent a dollar value? No, Kemba didn't have a dollar value. I know that is not the easiest thing to do, but it really requires a lot of reading. And if you, yes, I see Kemba says, so I guess I have to do more research, but it is possible, you know. All you need is really a shred of evidence to show the dollar value of job creation at FDI was, let's say, X, whereas the dollar value of the destructive consequences was, let's say, X plus 1. So that way you can really make a concrete statement that the impact of your MNE on the country in question was positive or negative. Keston, Sheldon, did you have a dollar value for your MNC's impact in the USA? Good, good. All right, good. Apart from Sheldon and those who have contributed, do we have any other students here who would like to ask any questions about the assignments? Anything in your research that may have led to a little dilemma, quandary, anything that you would like to ask? How many of you have used theories in your reports? If you have, just please indicate if you use theories. And how many of you have research theories? So today I spoke about the Harrod-Doma model, and I found that just yesterday I typed in MNC's theories, and off the bat in my first return I found the Harrod-Doma model. And students, I would like to encourage you to include more theories. Remember, you scored very high marks in CW1, and we would like to keep that grade. I see from Kemba, yes, yeah, theory. Anybody else? Did you take the liberty? I'm hoping, although we discussed in this session some of the theories and we've discussed it previously, and I gave you an additional one, the Harrod-Doma model, which shows a positive correlation between FDI and economic growth. What other theories did you encounter, please? Anybody? Have you been searching for theories? Have you been searching for theories? And if you listen to the conference from the UH, it was underscored, emphasized again, importance of a theoretical discussion. Did you encounter has anyone utilized any other theories other than what we discussed? So there's a little bit of silence. So I imagine from that silence that people have not conducted research on various theories and so on. I would like to really encourage that. It doesn't really take long. You just search for MNCs, theories, theoretical models related to MNCs, and try to read them, understand them, and integrate them into your discussion. Good. So do we have any other? I see we have people here. Do we have any other questions that you would like to ask? Anything that you would like to ask? Any clarification at all pertaining to what we have discussed today? The theories, your assignment, anything? I hope that you've been using your Harvard reference guide. Only one person emailed me for it. It was Ian Lawrence. You're not using generators. Please feel free if you need the document. I have it, or you could obtain it from Jude. If anybody would like to have a copy, please feel free. I've only received a request from one student, and remember you score up to 10 marks for good referencing. Yeah, Kemba, you're saying that you submitted your draft. Yes, I acknowledge receipt. I did not respond because I wanted to keep the if I clicked on it, it would turn gray, and I wanted to keep it black so it would be for my attention, and you will hear from me. You will receive a response either tonight or tomorrow. The students who have not submitted, I really hope that by extending the deadline, I can hear from you tomorrow. It's extended until tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Is there anybody who would like to ask any further questions? Anything concerning our discussion today on the 10 units? Also, the module leader in her conference emphasized the use of the ebook, which is the text, and she said you should incorporate a discussion. You should reference the text. So please take heed, reference the text. Also, I listened to the conference, and it was emphasized that in your choice of developed and developing countries, you must justify why you have chosen it. Meaning, Julio, I think your country was India and your developed country was Canada. What this means, Julio, you have to say in your report why you chose India, why you chose Canada. Sheldon, you would have to say why you chose the US. Kemba, you will have to say why you chose South Africa. So in fact, maybe you could tell me now, if you haven't said that in your assignment, please amend the assignment, or in fact, when I'm reviewing, I will note it. Sheldon, is there a reason you chose US? You will have to state that in your assignment. Good. What is the reason you chose the US? Just very briefly, what is the reason? I want to ensure that it is a credible reason. Kemba, did you have a reason for it? Very good. It was stated as a large market. Okay. So students, you have to state why your countries were chosen for discussion, and reasons could be to the effect the country, as Sheldon says, is a large market, or it's the most lucrative market, or it's the newest market that the country has embarked on. So when you say, if you say you've chosen South Africa, as Kemba has, you'll have to give a reason, and reasons may be the market is new, the market is lucrative, the company has been established in that country for the longest period of time. So you would have to give a reason like that, or you would have to say there was a lot of contention surrounding your MNC in that country. So please remember to specify why that country was chosen. Or another reason could be it was the first country that the company embarked operations on. So please, I see from Kemba, you did make mention of how long they were established, right? But apart from that, Kemba, please state it in black and white that something to this effect. This country was chosen for discussion because X, Y, and Z, something to that effect, right? So you'll want to do that for both your developed and for your developing country. For those of you who listened to the conference, like Sheldon, I imagine, and amended his assignment, please make that amendment. For those of you who have not submitted to me, when you are submitting to me, please include this amendment in your draft. Where would be the best place to do this? Julio, the best place to do this will be in the third section. The first section is executive summary. The section is where you discuss the role of MNCs in globalization, and the third section is your case study. You will recall the third section has 4 subsections. The first is a background to your MNC. The second subsection is developed. The third subsection is developing. And so in your developed and developing subsections, this is where you would place that statement for you. So in response to your question, when you're opening your discussion on the developing country, that is where you would say, this country was chosen for discussion X, Y, and Z. When you're opening a discussion for your developed country, that is where you would say, this country was chosen for A, B, and C. Is that clear? Please indicate, is it clearer, Julio? Very good, very good. Good, I'm glad. I'm happy for this. All right, students, is there anything? I also listened to the conference, and there was one or two points. One was the emphasizing why you chose your country. Another point that was made at the conference was the importance of using the recommended text and referencing it. Sheldon, I think your session was more informative than the webinar. Yes, I actually think mine was more informative as well. Thank you for that. What else did she say? She spoke about using the 15 references. I recommended 20. She said use 15 at a minimum, and I recommended you increase it by 20. Bridget, I see that you're in agreement that my session was better. Thanks for that. Marie, so I want to say thank you for your guidance. I got 82. I am really ecstatic for that, Marie. The students performed really well. Every student I spoke to so far scored in the 80s, and that's a phenomenal accomplishment. A phenomenal accomplishment. I see from Tasha, I don't know how to interpret that emoji. I don't know what that means. I'm kind of a bit slow on that. I don't know if you could tell me. From Bridget, the UH had given a structure like yours every semester. Well, hopefully, now that they have seen mine and my webinar is live, maybe from next semester and from the subsequent semesters, we may begin to see a change in the structure, and maybe it might be a bit more thorough. Yes, from Bridget, we appreciate it. You're welcome. Yes. So again, I want to use this forum to congratulate the students. I know I provide guidance to you, but I do not want to steal your thunder. I know we have students who make a lot of sacrifices, who work very hard. Many of you have full-time jobs. Many of you have commitments at home. Some of you have families and children, and I know it's a lot of sleepless nights, and I know it's a lot of painful work, and I want to openly commend you, your stellar performance, really high marks, 87, two students scored 87, many in the high 80s, 85, 83, 82, 80, 89, really good. Bridget, I hope so for the other modules. Yes, I hope so as well. So I'm trying to remember from the conversation, from the webinar, from the UH, the points I got were to justify why I've chosen your countries, make sure you use the recommended text, ensure that you have a minimum of 15 credible journal articles. That's all we can only hope from Sheldon. Yes. Anybody, do you have any other questions? If you saw the webinar from the UH, if there's anything that you need clarification, anything you want to say, from Bridget. It is also a financial strain, so to get support is very much appreciated value for money. Yes, this is something I believe people pay money. It's a lot of money. People expend time. It's the most valuable resources that human beings have, money and time. And I am always cognizant of that. I feel that sessions, whether they are in person face-to-face or whether they are online, I feel that people must always get value for money. They must always get value for time. There must always be something that benefit from, and I hope so. Kemba, I see you're saying thanks for your guidance. You scored 82. Really excellent, really, really excellent. I'm very proud of all my students. Jillian's score was 81. Students, I want you to observe the marks really, really high, really, really high. At least 15 to 20 people scored in the 80s, really high, really high. Tasha, beautiful grades. And I know that I provided guidance, but you have done a lot of work too. So it's really a symbiotic relationship that we have. Sounds almost like a date. But I'm really, really so pleased that students are performing well. I don't know if you know, the university has recently established an award, two awards. One award is for the most outstanding student from satellite countries, and that award was given to a CTS student. Her name is Salisha, very bright. She did very, very well. And the university has also established a new award for the most outstanding partner, and they are considering giving that award to CTS. And I know why they are considering giving that award to CTS, because the students are performing so well. Last semester for GMEC, students at CTS outperformed all of the other countries. Half of the students had marks in the 80s and the other half in the 70s. The same thing happened for the semester before. I taught a module called Contemporary Issues in Business. The module leader wrote a personal email to me indicating that my students had outperformed all of the other countries. And I want to say that I'm seeing a similar pattern happening for this course IGE, with the grades being so high. I would not be surprised if I receive similar emails from the university saying that the students again have outperformed. So every semester, what we see, what the observation we make is that every semester, last semester, the semester before, this semester, the performance is really outstanding. I'm really happy because you see marks like 80s, this is what would happen. That 80 is going to pull up a lower grade elsewhere, you know. So if you have a lower grade in, let's say, some other course, like 60, that 80 that you score in IGE or GME semester or whatever semester under my tuition, when you score a high grade like 80, what it's going to do is pull up your overall average, which increases the chances of scoring first class. So let's say you score 80 in this module. If you score 80 in this module and you score 80 in one or two other modules, that immediately pulls up your 60 average into a 70 category for first class. So yes, please keep up the good work. Doing good work in IGE is not just good work in IGE. What it results in, it increases your chances of first class. So please keep that under consideration, and I really want to continue to motivate and inspire you. I'm really happy when students email me or you say in the chat or whatever it is, you've gotten a really high grade. I'm really harmed by that, and it continues to motivate me to provide the guidance that I do. Okay, students, so thanks for sharing all of that feedback. Tasha, you want to explain what that what is it? Is it a female blushing? Okay. So I was saying thank you. All right. Yes, you're welcome. I know you performed really good. You scored 87. I don't know how to give applause in this I don't know what function it is, but I want to applaud you, and I want to applaud all of you. All of you did really well. So I hope that made your day. I hope it made your weekend. I know you can't go out and celebrate, but maybe you could celebrate at home. Tell your friends, your family, perform very well. Marie Bannister, thank you. You're much appreciated. You're welcome. So high grades always a cause to support. However, you always a cause for celebration. I'm sorry, whether it's a slice of cheesecake or Black Forest cake or um, a glass of single malt whiskey, whatever you like. So students, I'm about to adjourn, and I really hope that when I review your assignments, I hope to see an outstanding quality. And I hope that CW2 is also an outstanding grade. There's nothing that would hearten me more than to see all of you graduating on that stage, and a large percentage of students with first class honors. So it's now 12:03, and before I adjourn the session again, is there anybody who would have any need for clarification? And while you're typing your questions again, I want to openly commend and applaud hard work, a lot of hard work. Yes, I know I supported you, but you put in the hours, you put in the hard work. So congratulations. Before I sign off, any final questions, any final comments? Those who submitted your work, you can hear from me tonight or you can hear from me tomorrow. Those of you who have not, please, you have extended deadline until tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I will not accept anything beyond tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Okay, if there are no further questions, I would like to adjourn this session. So thank you for participating. I hope that you've benefited from the perusal of the 10 units we looked at. Try to integrate a discussion of the MNCs. Try to use the material from the UH in your assignment. Good. Mariel, you're welcome. Mariel, I saw your assignment, and you will hear from me by tonight or tomorrow. Okay, students, so I'm going to log off now. Thank you for participating at today's webinar, and forward to receiving a response from me tonight or tomorrow. Those who have not submitted, please do so by Sunday at 8 a.m. Thank you. Please have a good day. I'm signing off. Good afternoon.